So in this video, I want to look at multiple views of how things might go in the war in Ukraine. I'm going to start here with this. This was just yesterday. Biden and Sullivan halt push for Ukraine aid amid concerns of Russia's nuclear threat. Well, we know that Russia is going to continue to use that nuclear saber rattling, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. But this was really kind of interesting. Like we talk about, and don't get me wrong, Speaker Johnson is the problem as far as holding up Ukraine aid. But there's also been a deterrent effect against the United States and against the West that Putin has done pretty well. Let's just read a few paragraphs here. U.S. President Joe Biden and his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, bought into the idea that Russia could use nuclear weapons if the U.S. provides Ukraine with too many weapons, head of U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee Michael McCaul said in an interview. He's a Republican, by the way. He's a Reagan Republican. Jake Sullivan is too cautious. He's very timid, he said. And he has bought into the idea that if we give them, that's Ukraine, too much, Russia will use tactical nuclear weapons against us. Most of the intelligence I've seen suggests that they won't, because that would be a game changer for everybody. It's not him, Blinken, he's talking about Blinken, slowing down aid for Ukraine. I think it's Jake Sullivan and the White House. This is a very timid reaction. I like Colin Powell's doctrine. You're either in or you're out. Don't stop halfway. You know, we are giving Putin exactly what he wants. This is a stalemate. It's a war of attrition, and he has more bodies to throw. Now, if you want to understand the Powell doctrine, here's a slide from one of my classes in my Power and Influence class where we go through this awesome book. It worked for me in life and leadership. Following a speech to a naval audience in Annapolis, I was asked why I had sent General Schwarzkopf 2 additional aircraft carrier battle groups when he had only asked for 1. My answer was simple. I didn't have time to get the rest of them. This is a gang fight. That's the right perspective. That's the attitude that you should be taking. And by the way, again, that comes from this book. It worked for me in life and leadership. I'll put the link below if you're interested. Okay, last night I saw this. Why Jake Sullivan is not only weak and a coward, but also incredibly dangerous, explained in 60 seconds.
Everyone. I'm going to prove to you in less than a minute that Jake Sullivan is not only an idiot and a coward, he's also one of the most dangerous people on earth because his stupidity is that dangerous. Specifically, Mr. Sullivan said the other day that if the United States gives too many conventional weapons to Ukraine to defend against the irrefutably illegal and genocidal invasion by Russia, that Russia would respond with a nuclear first strike on America. Now, that would be, of course, a strategic strike, forcing the United States to respond with strategic nuclear weapons, including hundreds which would land right on the Kremlin with pinpoint accuracy in about 20 to 25 minutes, and less than that when launched from submarines sitting in the various oceans around Russia.
Yeah, I don't see that scenario happening, at least not over Ukraine. I mean, there could be Article 5 triggered, and then because he keeps going, that's a greater threat, actually, than containment within right now.
You know why this is wrong? Number one, it has no basis in Russian nuclear doctrine. It has no basis in really anybody's nuclear doctrine. And in fact, what it proves is that Jake Sullivan has been asleep for the last 25 years. Putin does not escalate in response to strength. He only escalates in response to weakness. So in fact, Mr. Sullivan's mealy-mouthed, milquetoast weakness is what ensures further Russian aggression.
Okay, Putin doesn't escalate in response to strength. He escalates in response to weakness. And I think that's a pretty clear truism. That's what I have read as well. Okay, here we go. This is Putin talking about it, trying to persuade the West that this isn't a good idea. And of course, he has persuaded folks like Matt Gaetz, also a Republican, very MAGA Republican. He's the one that triggered the event that got Speaker McCarthy out. Okay, I do not want to be drawn into a nuclear war with Russia over who gets to rule Crimea. But see, that's short-sighted, and there's more to the story than that. He's already subverting the international order, and if he goes further, you will be drawn into a war, so we need to address this. But here's what Putin is saying. I want to stress this one more time. I've been saying it, but I very much want you to finally hear me and deliver it to your audience in print, TV, and online. Do you realize that if Ukraine joins NATO and decides to take Crimea back through military means, the European countries will automatically get drawn into a military conflict with Russia. Of course, NATO's unlimited potential and that of Russia are incomparable, and I demonstrated that the other day. We understand that, but we also understand that Russia is one of the world's leading nuclear powers, and it's superior to many of those countries in terms of number of modern nuclear force components. There will be no winners, and you will find yourself drawn into this conflict against your will. Okay, so that's how Putin is using nuclear weapons as a threat, as a shield from allowing NATO forces on the ground or allowing this or that or the other thing. So that's where we are, and Jake Sullivan is buying that. Okay, now let's turn our attention to whether this will actually come to a vote. Here's Tucker Carlson talking to Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it's really interesting to my mind what Marjorie is saying here in this like 1.5 minute clip. Will this actually get to the floor? And most of you in your comments say, no, he's never going to bring it to the floor. He's just doing Trump's bidding, and I get that. I understand why you would say that. But this answer really surprised me, because it came from Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Last question. Is this actually going to happen? Will this funding go through with Mike Johnson leading the charge after recess?
Yes. Everything that I've seen, everyone that I've talked to, is this is happening next week. He's going to suspend the rules. He's going to bring it to the floor for a vote. Every Democrat is going to wear their blue and yellow lapel pins and flags and scarves, and they're going to vote to fund that. And we're going to have, a percentage of our Republicans that actually support it will vote to fund it.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying that this is coming to a vote, and a percentage of Republicans are going to vote for it, and it'll get done, and now I think that she's talking about the new one, not the Senate bill coming across, but whatever Mike Johnson's new plan is.
And it will pass in the House. It will pass in the House. It'll go to the Senate. Mitch McConnell will line up his little Senate soldiers, and they will vote for it. And Chuck Schumer can't wait to pass it because Ukraine is everything, right? Ukraine is everything.
Well, it is important. People are dying because of lack of ammunition and lack of ability to fight off aggressors that are invading their country. Like, we should probably frame that properly.
Murdering an entire generation of Ukrainian men is the most important thing that they can do. Okay, she just said murdering an entire generation of Ukrainian men is the most important thing the word they, she's talking about Congress, can do. That's what Russia is doing, not what Congress is doing. What Congress would be doing would be helping them defend themselves against it. Anyway. And yeah, they'll pass it, and then Joe Biden will sign it into law.
Yeah, shutting down.
I sure hope so.
That's their agenda.
Now, this is French Hill. French Hill is a representative who has a plan to pay for it. I'm not excited about this way, but let's hear how he plans to pay for this bill with what he calls the Repo Act.
Of America's partnership with our European allies and our Asian allies in backing Ukraine's effort to eject Putin from their sovereign country. He made an illegal invasion starting back in 2014, but then a full-scale invasion in February of 2022. And that's been rejected by the United Nations, by the G7, by the International Court of Justice. Putin is a war criminal in this case. And so I think the right thing for us to do is to help Ukrainians fight the Russians, teach them a lesson, because I think it has global impact. If we let this authoritarian simply waltz into a country and take it over, control the Black Sea, control Ukraine's agriculture and industrial resources, what's to say that she or some other country won't invade a neighbor and do the same thing with no pushback from the global?
Now, what's interesting is that everyone that I've shown you is a Republican. We started with Michael McCaul, who's a committee chair in Congress, and then you saw Matt Gaetz and what his position is, which he's on the other side, and then you saw Tucker and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they're on the other side, and then you saw this guy who's pro-Ukraine. Again, there's a schism within my party, and you just need to understand that. Okay, let's keep listening to how he plans to fix this.
And I'm sure you have conversations with the speaker. What is there a crack of light? Is the door slightly open? I saw that he was willing maybe to bring something forward, given some other conditions. And what is his status right now? As the Republican majority gets slimmer and slimmer and slimmer in the House?
Right. Well, Speaker Johnson, since he became Speaker last October, has expressed his strong personal support for.
Did you notice that word personal support? That's not the same thing as strong support, as strong personal support. Hey, I agree with this, but right.
America's defense partnership for our allies in Israel and Taiwan, and supporting the Ukrainians in ejecting Putin. He said quite clearly, Putin cannot win. And so he has some options on how to get that on to the House floor and get a vote. And when he puts those lethal defense measures for Taiwan, Israel on the House floor with Ukraine, he will get an overwhelming bipartisan vote, in my view. The key is for him how to do it and when to do it. And I hope that happens very shortly after this Easter recess of this week.
Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks it's going up. This guy thinks it's going up. The key for Johnson is how to do it so he doesn't get voted out of office by his own party. That's really the trick for him.
So that's the timing on it. After within the next 2 weeks, you think something will actually be brought up?
That's my view, and I think that's important because on April 16th, the Council of Europe will be meeting in support of my bill, the Repo Act, to seize Russian assets. And I hope that whatever we get to the House floor over the next couple of weeks includes a provision whereby countries that enact their local jurisdiction laws can seize Russian assets, because I think that would be the most effective way to pay for Ukraine's reconstruction and teach an economic diplomacy lesson here, Joe. If you invade another country, not only will you be met with military force, but we're going to clean out your checking accounts too, and we're going to put on sanctions on revenue in your supply chain. We've got to demonstrate through diplomacy, military action, and economic diplomacy that this kind of action cannot continue.
Okay, now I appreciate what he's trying to do. I think it's wrong-headed because I think it's actually going to negatively impact the financial system as it is. You don't have to be an economist to be in Congress, right? Here's what an economist actually thinks. This is Robert Shiller. I've actually used one of his books in class. He's a Nobel laureate. He's compared a possible use of Russian assets by the United States to a cataclysm. Now, the trick is Putin wants to move to an alternate dollar system. The dollar is very strong because it's a safe haven, right? Pretty much everyone in the world knows if you put your money in dollars, it's not going to go away. I mean, like we have inflation, but compared to what other countries might do to it, this is a pretty safe place. And our banking system is a very safe place. So Shiller talks about it like this. The U.S., and by the way, Schiller's on the left. I mean, he's not like MAGA or anything. The U.S. use of frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine could have cataclysmic consequences for the current dollar-denominated system and encourage people to save in a different currency. This opinion was expressed by Robert Shiller, Nobel Prize winner and economics professor at Yale University. What kind of signal is being sent to dozens of countries that, like Russia, including, after all, the G7 countries, convert their savings into dollars for the sake of security and entrust them to the reliable hands of Uncle Sam? If America does this to Russia today, then tomorrow it can do this to anyone, Shiller concluded. This will destroy the halo of security that surrounds the dollar and will be the first step toward de-dollarization. Now, I've seen this kind of thing covered in TASS and covered in Pravda, and Russia likes it. Of course they like it because it tells their story. But I think he's still right. I think this is not the way to go. Now, again, Shiller is a serious economist who has, he's a guy who's predicted the dot-com bubble and the housing crisis in 2008. That's like the Case-Shiller index predicts housing market, right? So like he's the real deal. Won a Nobel Prize in 2013. Again, I'm arguing that this is not the right way to go. And when people say, well, why, let's just take it from Russia, they don't deserve it. One, you're not taking from Russia. You're taking from some of their oligarchs. You're not taking from like Russia proper. Second, you wouldn't do this if it wasn't the scenario with Russia and Ukraine. You're tilting the scale because you want this particular thing, not because this is the right thing necessarily. We do this all the time. I think that's what's happening. That's what's at play here. And we shouldn't do this. We know if we really step back from this and we didn't have the emotion tied to it, we'd say, ruining potentially our economic system because we want to punish Russia is not a really good idea. Now, I think David Cameron has tried to split the difference, and this is actually much more feasible. It kind of uses the Russian assets, but it doesn't go as far as seizing them all at this point. And you tell me what you think on the backside of this. I want to hear what you have to say, but let's listen to David Cameron. He's the British Foreign Minister.
NATO conference here in Brussels. My challenge is to try and explain everything we're going to do now before I leave this conference centre and get into the car. When people come to NATO conferences like this, they make a lot of speeches, they read them out, and they're good speeches, they're important points, but I think people often wonder, well, what's going to happen next? So let me tell you what I think we need to do. We had an incredibly clear exposition from the Ukrainian foreign minister about what his country needs to make sure it can prevail against Russia after their illegal invasion. He couldn't have been more clear. So let me tell you the things I'm going to do. First thing, all of us, every foreign minister needs to go back to their country, get hold of their defense minister and ask, what more can we do to help Ukraine in terms of air defense? They suffered in March alone over 700 missile and drone attacks. We've got to do more. Britain already does a massive amount. Trained 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers, given them £7 billion. The first to provide equipment like long-range weapons and tanks and anti-aircraft weapons, but we've got to do more.
And that's a good step. I think the Brits have been awesome so far.
Next thing we've all got to do is get to our treasuries, get to our chancellors, get to our finance ministers and say, what are we going to do to make sure we use these frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine to pay for this war and pay for the reconstruction of their country? There are creative things that we can do. One day, Russia's going to have to pay reparations for its illegal invasion of Ukraine. And when it does that, that can pay back the money that now needs to be given to Ukraine to help them in what they're doing. Next thing.
Okay, so that's a bridge farther than where he was before. He was before of let's use the interest from these assets to support Ukraine. Now he's talking about using it and then paying it back with Russian reparations. I'm not sure where the line is here, but you have to be really, really careful. But the bottom line here of all these videos is I want to know, what do you think? I have strong opinions about things, but I'm trying to frame it to show you, hey, they're saying this and they're saying that, and this one's saying this and that one's saying that. But you have to make up your own mind and think through this. But you want to make the decisions based on the best evidence. And not just even listening to me. Go listen to other pro-Ukrainian YouTubers. Read the news yourself. Try to understand this as much as possible and then make up your own mind. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.